Hey there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I thought I would take the liberty of coming to the park and shooting a video showing you my personal top 10 favorite phones with large batteries. There's a lot to choose from out there, so I've made a few decisions along the way. We're going for a minimum of a 1080p display, a minimum of a 32GB hard drive, as well as a minimum of 3GB of RAM. This means that phones will, for the most part, breeze through day-to-day tasks and that kind of thing. I've read the review on all 10 of these phones, and I've put down my interesting notes as well as a few things to compare between each model. Oh, and one last thing. If you're new here, you should probably subscribe and click on that bell icon to receive notifications. I will be posting more videos in the future, and specifically I'll be doing a review on my #1 favorite phone from this list. I have ordered it and I'm waiting for it to come in the post. I'm very excited. Every phone on this list has received a red mark for no optical image stabilization, so if that is a deal breaker for you, then you might want to find a different list to look at, unfortunately. I've also found the cheapest price between a bunch of different shopping websites for each individual phone. Keep in mind that if you want your phone to ship out to you more quickly, like using DHL to post, then you would need to spend maybe $25 to $35 more. Anyway, I'll kick things off with 3 phones by the Chinese company Doogee. All 3 phones are relatively similar outside of the size of their battery. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I've never heard it before myself either. Number 10. The Doogee BL5000. Its positive parts are that it's got 5050 mAh battery, 4GB of RAM, 64GB of storage, a 1080p 5.5-inch IPS panel. It's got a fingerprint reader as well as 2A fast charging. The downsides for it are a slightly older 28nm 8-core 1.5GHz processor, average photos to a resolution of 13 megapixels. The camera can only shoot 1080p video at only 30 FPS, which is a bit sad for people who like 1080-60. And of course, it's got no optical image stabilization. One of the good bits of it though is that it does only cost $181.77 with free shipping. The next phone on this list is the Doogee BL7000, and I think you know how big the battery will be in this one. It's got a 7060 mAh battery. It takes only 2 hours to fully replenish it, which is amazing for such a large battery. It's got 64GB of storage, as well as 4GB worth of RAM. It's got really good build quality. It weighs 220 grams, which is a little bit heavier than other phones, but most phones in this category will be heavier than other phones. Unfortunately, it's got pretty average battery efficiency, so it actually runs down quicker than other phones in this category. It's got average system performance as well as a relatively slow fingerprint reader. Some of the downsides of this phone are its subpar camera, lack of AC Wi-Fi, which may or may not be a downside for you. Its auto brightness is not very good and pretty slow to react. It's got pretty low-end gaming potential, as well as a 28nm 1.5GB octa-core CPU. But you can have it for as little as $189.82 with free shipping, so not a bad value, I suppose. Next on the chopping block is the Oukatel K10000 Pro. And once again, I'm sorry if I just butchered that name. It's another phone with a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS panel. It's also got 32GB worth of storage as well as 3GB worth of RAM. So that's the lowest amount of RAM and storage on this list, but by no means is it a slouch. It features a 10,000 mAh battery, as you might expect, and a fingerprint reader, which is very nice. The camera has a very bright f1.8 maximum aperture on the back, but unfortunately its video is locked to 1080p at 30 FPS again, which is really annoying because 1080-60 is where it's at. Unfortunately, due to its shape, you can't actually use normal charging cables. The charging cable has to be a bit longer to fit into the back of the phone. It's also got a pretty average 13 megapixel snapper on it, which could get you by if you didn't really care too much about the image quality. It's another one of those phones that feature the 28nm 1.5GHz octa-core processor, and it's kind of annoying because 28nm processors are much less efficient than 14 or 16nm ones. It's the heaviest phone out of the lot, of course. Its dimensions are 161.7 by 77.8 by 14mm. Most phones are maybe 8mm long on average. It's got no optical image stabilization, and the selfie camera is an f2.8 aperture, which is probably one of the darker ones out of the bunch. Coming in at number 7 is Xiaomi's original Mi Max. Unfortunately, this phone has only got a 4850 mAh battery, so it doesn't quite have 5K, but it's still a really large battery and could see you running the phone for a long time. It's got a 1080p panel, 4K video, 16 megapixel snapper with f2.0 aperture, as well as a rear-mounted fingerprint reader and AC Wi-Fi. It comes in at 203 grams, has a 5 megapixel f2.0 selfie cam, and comes in 3 different configurations. 16 gigabytes of storage with 2 gigabytes of RAM, 32/64 gigabytes of storage with 3 gigabytes of RAM, and 128 gigabytes of storage with 4 gigabytes of RAM. It's upgradable to Android 7.0 and has an operating system that it looks just like an iPhone. The design is also fairly similar to an iPhone, so if you like iPhones, then this would be really good. Unfortunately for myself, I don't really prefer that kind of thing, so it's not my favorite way to set up a phone. Unfortunately, it's got a 6 or 8 core 28 nanometer 1.8 gigahertz processor in it. So it is a little bit faster than the other ones, but it actually consumes more power anyway. That one can be bought for $268 with free shipping. But unfortunately right now, the Xiaomi Mi Max 2 also costs around about that price, so I'd probably skip the Xiaomi unless you got it on a good deal. Coming in at number 6 is the Oukitel K6000 Plus. It's great how consecutive numbers work, isn't it? As you can imagine, it's got a 6080 mAh battery, 4 gigabytes of RAM, as well as 64 gigabytes of internal storage. One of the things that popped out to me though was that this phone can expand it up to 2 whole terabytes with a micro SD card, which is the largest in this group. It's got a 5.5 inch 1080p IPS panel, just like most of them, and it's got a 16 megapixel f2.0 front camera, which is both a wide angle lens as well as a high resolution sensor. It comes with Android 7.0 and weighs only 207 grams, which is about average or maybe a little bit light for this group. It supports 12 volt 2 amp charging, which is super fast, but unfortunately it doesn't support AC Wi-Fi, nor does it have NFC. The actual panel has relatively low brightness, which makes it hard to see in sunlight, as well as a noticeable blue tinge, and it may annoy a bunch of you who like to have accurate colors. It's also got a pretty average runtime thanks to its 28 nanometer 1.5 gigahertz octa-core. And of course, its video caps out at 1080p at 30 FPS. Ugh, I hate it. Coming up next is Oukitel's K3. It's another 1080p panel with 4 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes worth of storage. It's got a great design, a 6000 mAh battery, front-facing LED flash, and dual cameras. It's got 2 lots of 16 megapixel and 2 megapixel cameras, one on the front and one on the back. It's very new, and it comes in at a price of $179.69. It supports Android 7.0 and has an 8-core 1.5 GHz 28 nanometer processor, and unfortunately it only supports up to 128 GB SD cards. Coming in at number 4 is Umidigi's S2 Pro. Sorry if I butchered that name, by the way. It sports a 6-inch 18:9 1080p panel, which means that it's got slightly more resolution on the top and bottom than most other phones. It's rocking a 16 nanometer 2.6 GHz octa-core processor, which is both efficient and pretty fast. It's got a 5100 mAh battery, USB Type-C support, as well as 128 GB of storage space and 6 GB of RAM. It's probably the lightest of the bunch at only 186 grams, has a fingerprint sensor, and can be expanded up to 1/4 terabyte. It's got an f2.0 front camera, great build quality with a almost bezel-less display, and a 16 megapixel front shooter. Unfortunately, it's got no NFC, no wireless AC, and no headphone jack. So it's just like those new iPhones, isn't it? Luckily for us, you can adapt the USB Type-C port to a headphone jack very easily, and the price is also the priciest out of the bunch at $379.64. Next on the list is the Ulefone Power 3. I'm sorry if that's not how you're supposed to pronounce it. It's got a 5.99 inch 18:9 1080p panel. It's got 4 gigabytes of RAM, 64 gigabytes of storage space, as well as 6080 milliamps of battery power. It's rocking a 16 nanometer 2 gigahertz octa-core processor, which will be more power efficient than the 2.8 gigahertz one. It's got a bezel-less display and a relatively good camera. Unfortunately, it only shoots 1080p footage at 30 FPS and is also missing a headphone jack, which is so annoying. But as we know, we can adapt a headset to pass audio through the charging port for as little as $2. It weighs 210 grams and costs $290.40 with free shipping, so it's quite a bit cheaper. Coming in at number 2 is Xiaomi's Mi Max 2. Like I said before with the original Mi Max, it costs only $265.75 with free shipping, so there's no real reason to get the older Xiaomi. It supports Android 7.1.1 and uses a 14nm 8-core 2GHz processor, which is very energy efficient. Its SD card slot is expandable up to 1/4 TB. It has 4GB of RAM as well as 32, 64 or 128GB worth of storage space. It has support for Quick Charge 3.0, has wireless AC, can shoot 4K video, and has a 5300 mAh battery. It has a rear fingerprint reader, and of course doesn't have optical image stabilization. It weighs 211 grams, which is fairly low considering that its panel is 6.44 inches big and is a 1080p resolution. Coming in at number 1 is the Lenovo P2, and like I said earlier, I have already ordered one of these. Editing Kaz here. Actually, it has turned up, so please do subscribe because I'm hoping to get a review of this phone out in about a week, so stay tuned. It also sports a 14nm 8-core 2GHz processor, has a 5100 mAh battery, has 4GB of RAM as well as 32 or 64GB worth of storage space, has 4K video, and also only weighs 177 grams, which I think is the lightest out of the bunch. It's got a 1080p panel on a 5.5-inch display, which is an acceptable resolution for that size display. It's got a 5-megapixel f2.2 selfie cam, as well as a 13-megapixel f2.0 back camera. It does support NFC as well as wireless AC, has a front fingerprint scanner, supports fast charging, as well as a SD card to the size of 1/4 TB, and costs just $289.95 with free shipping. Although I opted for a more expensive, much quicker shipping, which then costed me about $313. Oh well, that was a lot of information. I hope that you guys found this very useful in your buying decisions. I definitely did, of course, because now I've bought a new phone. If you have any more questions, then I might be able to help you out in the comments section. I also look forward to reading your comments. Which one of these is your favorite phone, or which one would you prefer to go for if you're going for a large battery phone? Do you have any other suggestions? I'm sure we'd all like to know. I hope that you enjoyed this video as much as I did, and I hope that it helps you in your buying decisions, because I know it helped me. It's a bit hard to figure out which phone is the best for you, but I hope that this list will give you a good idea. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.